Boom, and we're live. And well, tonight I'm going to go straight into this conversation. We were just talking about before going, we were going live, just about how the resistance of life and about how where we are in life. So before I go any further tonight, Nikki, how you doing tonight?
Pretty good. Awesome. Thanks.
Well, I tell you what. I mean, as anyone who's read the bio to this the podcast, I mean, you've lived a fascinating life. You've been a ski instructor. You've been a chef. You've been lots of things. So I think where I'd like to really sort of start this conversation with you, I want to take you right back, and the kind of questions I really want to take maybe to a previous life. And the question I'd like to ask is, at what age did you take up kickboxing? And can you remember much about the very first fight you had?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I was a teenager when I did kickboxing. I did karate and also I did triathlons. And triathlon is like a lots of endurance. You have to push really long before you're hitting your limits. And then I was doing the first time in my life sparring in a gym, and I realized I was kicking my limits like closely to less than a minute. And I was fascinated about it because I like always pushing to my boundaries. And I realized in short distance endurance, you can push your limits way quicker than in like long distance endurance in like triathlon. So I was fascinated about it. And that's the reason I started karate. Finally, I got involved with kickboxing then.
And can you remember your first kick, your very first fight you had as a kickboxer? I mean, can you remember much
Oh,
memories of
yeah,
that?
sparring with the guys is like a kind of a real match because it's definitely a huge difference because guys have more muscle mass, and so I got knocked out the first time I was sparring with the dudes. But yeah, the first female fights was like German championships, and yeah, that's what I remember in the 90s. And then my big fight was in 1997 Copenhagen World Championships in kickboxing, and I was the winner of the world champion title.
See, the reason I mention this because I think your whole inspiration about what you are as a person, which I'm sure we're going to tackle in this conversation. But you seem to have it right from the very early age. You seem to jump into areas and that maybe this very thing. I mean, a female. I mean, you just brushed over it, but there you are. You're a female doing kickboxing in in the 90s in Germany. That's I mean, was that drive always with you ever since you were a child to sort of like always sort of push? Because like I said, being a female boxer in a very male dominated world, again, kickboxing wasn't really even to this day it's such a overly female pop dominated sport. So you've taken a challenge, and that's what I'm saying. Was that something you've always had from day one as a child?
Well, what happened was I was a teenager and I was breaking my neck and my back, and I was really severe injured, and I was for several weeks in the hospital already when I was a teenager. And I had severe back pain and got not really motivated by the doctors. They told me, sports, and also I want to become a police officer. And the doctor didn't wrote the kind of right of final examination, so I could not get that career started. So I got really angry and started giving up and becoming a couch potato and getting depressed. I discovered sports, and sports really helped me. I did not had pain anymore so much after I went to the gym, and I worked out my muscles every day. So that's the reason I became really motivated in practicing sports every day. So I was bicycling to the gym, worked out pretty much every day for several hours. And then I discovered by accident kickboxing in the gym, and I joined the guys. And so what you just said, it was not very popular in that time for women, but it was a funny story. The coach said after I was annoying him for like several million times, please let me work out with you guys. So please let me check it out. And he said, no, no, it's not for girls, not for girls. And then finally he said to this co-trainer, let's have her training with us, and probably she will not ask me any more these questions ever all, because he thought I will give up after the first workout session. And then he realized that I had talent, and then since then this day I finally was accepted and I was able to work out with the dudes. Yeah,
So,
that's what it started.
so that I mean, exactly. So that very point. I mean, let's linger on that. I mean, what made you? I mean, like you said, you pestered this coach a million times. So I mean, what's going through your mind? I mean, why? What was that determination? Was it more literally every time someone says to you no, it makes you more determined? Was that part of the essence of what drove you?
Yeah, absolutely. You got it right away figured out. As soon as people telling me you cannot do something, I'm getting definitely more motivated. So it's actually a good thing when people telling me I cannot do, because then I'm finally getting really motivated. Yeah, that's for sure. That's really true. Yeah.
So like you said, you mentioned you got to yourself to there. You got to the Copenhagen Championship. You got yourself the award. I mean, what made you step away from kickboxing and take on a new challenge?
Well, I accomplished the maximum goal is fighting for the world championships. Then I was an amateur kickboxing, then I became a professional boxer. So then the next career was then professional boxing. So I became European champion, and then I was fighting for the world champion title in professional boxing. So I reached the big goal of fighting for the world champion title. I did not won, otherwise my life came out in a different direction. But after that world champion fight in 2000 in Cologne, I quit professional boxing, and that was my last fight in 2000 in Cologne for the world champion title.
So at that moment, when you quit, I mean, did you have any plans what you wanted to do, or did you just sort of like open your life up and say, okay, what's going to jump in? I mean, how did that decision to sort of take the next sort of leap into the future what you did?
Well, after the fight was over, I mean, professional boxing for female was not really professional because you still had to work for making a living. And I was born and raised with my family. They had a restaurant, so I became, because of that matter, a professional chef. So I always had to work for a living. So I was working for caterings as a freelancer. So I had free time on my hand to decide how many contracts I can take. And so I was continue on working in that profession. Also, I did workouts every day as a professional boxer. So I had like two careers parallel. So after I quit my last fight, I decided to work on a cruise vessel, an American cruise ship. So I was several months on open sea, and I worked on an American cruise ship. So
Oh,
that was like a big step right away to forget about my professional career and move on and figure out something completely new.
well, I'm just, I mean, immediately thinking, and that's a complete jump. I mean, there you are from one moment, sort of like, preparing yourself, training every morning. I'd imagine getting up very early, running the miles, doing the weights, and then you're an American cruise ship. I mean, that's just, I mean, what? I mean, did you find that hard to acclimatize because I mean, your whole body, like I said, you must have been used to running and
Well,
training and.
yeah, I forgot to mention, I before I was able to work on an American cruise ship, I had to figure out how to speak English proper, because in that time I had only high school English. And so before I got that contract, I decided to fly to Australia to book myself like an advanced English course to prepare myself for that contract. So I did, flew over to Australia, to Brisbane. I had my bicycle with me, and I bicycled from Brisbane on the East Coast all the way up to Cairns. I studied English for several weeks, and at the end of the study English course, I learned how to scuba dive on the Great Barrier Reef. There was like a trip of like almost 2 months. And then I came back to Berlin, Germany, and then I was ready to jump on board for that cruise ship. And my English was then all right by that time, after 2 months spending time in Australia. So I felt like prepared. I can communicate and be able to make that contract happen. Yeah.
See, this is the very essence of what I think is really, important about life. I mean, you just said then we were in that little gap between you joining the cruise ship. You look what you did. You cycled from one point of Australia to another, which is okay. We can't let that pass. And then you went swimming in the barrier. I mean, again, I mean, I have from people who know me, I have a great love for cycling, and I love to go out and really eat the miles. So I can understand the pleasure you would have found, but the distance. I mean, again, the first question that comes into my mind when you're cycling all that distance, were you doing that by yourself? I mean, how does that how do you get? I mean, how do you do that? I mean, what do you do for the actual ones if you're in the middle of nowhere and you have a puncture or, I mean, just give me some of the actual day-to-day practicalities where it's like. I mean, you just said, oh, I cycle from here to there, and then I mean, how many miles are you talking in distance?
Well, I mean, bicycling, you have an entire daytime. I mean, it's like daylight over 10 hours time. So it's not really hard to bicycle between 60 and 100 miles. I mean, you have your panniers, you have your gear, so it weighs extra. So I never had the money that I can afford to just bicycle on a road bike and having a credit card and shop in a hotel room. So I had to carry all my gear. So I always had a tent and a sleeping bag and all the good stuff. So be able to pull over and I never spend time for like accommodations for in a hotel because that's quite expensive. So I like the freedom about bicycling because bicycling, you have your bicycle right away with you in the airport. You just put the bicycle together. You don't need a cab. You don't need a taxi to get somewhere around. And I did several trips already when I was a teenager. The first bicycling trip was in Greece. I bicycled from Thessaloniki all the way to Halkidiki to the Three Finger Islands, Armenitis. So I was a teenager. I was like in 16, 17 years old when I did that trip. So I mean, yeah, I always did bicycling. I did triathlon before I became a kickboxer, so I'm very familiar with bicycling in general. And you know, when you're bicycling all your life, so that's no big deal if you have a puncture or you just learn that already in a young
Hmm.
age how to fix that. So that's just becomes natural. So yeah, no big deal. I
So
mean,
when
it's
you
like
are
learning by doing, you know. I mean, everything in life is like learning by doing. You jump in the cold water and you learn how to swim. That's the way how it works, right?
that's a philosophy I've carried through my life. Yeah, definitely. I mean, on again, just on the cycling one, when you're eating up the miles, do you do this in silence, or will you listen to music? And if you are listening to music, what kind of music do you like to listen to when you're out there alone by yourself cycling through the middle of nowhere?
Well, as a teenager, I was really drawn into music and I had to listen all the time. Like I remember having a Walkman like in the 80s and 90s when I started bicycling. But now in the new days, I mean, right now I don't feel like I need music. I just, especially going to a new continent like Australia, I mean, you just fascinated about being so far away from your own continent. And then it's just interesting. And there's so many awesome birds in Australia. So when you're bicycling along like lonely highways, not major highways, you really want to listen to the sounds what is by your surroundings. So that's definitely way more exciting as that being distracted by kind of music, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. And that's the other thing. I mean, for people who maybe never sort of done those kind of trips, and as you know, I mean, you're talking about some remote parts of the world there. I mean, you're talking, where there's not, you're not sort of seeing a service station every 10 miles. You're talking in the middle of nowhere. So my question would be to you would be, I mean, you must have seen some absolutely amazing things with, like nature and stuff. I mean, what's been one of your overriding memories you sort of like, particularly in Australia, you saw, actually out in the middle of nowhere on a bike, what you saw with nature?
Well, I saw kangaroos. That was pretty awesome. So I mean, they're wild kangaroos, but they have no enemies. I mean, they're not getting threatened by humans. So I mean, I was able to get really close, and actually, I was able to pet a wild kangaroo. That was pretty cool. Yeah.
Oh wow! And
In
so
a way,
okay, so
that was
like
another amazing natural kind of thing I saw. I saw hatching turtles on a beach. So that was perfect timing on the right time in the right place. There was an evening tour guided, and then I saw this little turtles like ping pong balls jumping out of the beach. I mean, that was a fascinating kind of thing to witness. I mean, that was really incredible. Yeah.
no,
So that was.
that's one of them. I'm fortunate enough to you. I was the same when I in Venezuela. I not only did I saw the turtle actually come up through the middle of the night and gave birth, but then the turtle in the little hatch and then again, this is one of the things. I mean, you'll be fully aware of. I mean, someone who's traveled in nature and done what you've done, it makes you another thing very humble because you realise that just that exactly you said about the turtles. That turtle has come to that beach that you've seen for maybe 100, 200, 300. We don't know how long, and it comes back to the same spot, and then it really makes you realise of like what we can't achieve anything in our lives and we can't get up and achieve our goals when this is what nature's showing us that it can do. It's always, I think, good to be humbled, and I'm sure that's one of the overriding experiences you must have a lot being out in the nature. That is how actual we are, just a very small lucky experience on this great big wide rock that just tumbles through space. And you hear this a lot and people say, oh, nature's great, but I think it's most people don't, as you would know, they don't ever leave their city homes or their suburbia and really realise about how the majestic of nature and how much it makes you feel how vulnerable we really are. I mean, we are very vulnerable. You know, that's one of the things. I mean, come back to your in the outback. I mean, if you're, you know, something happens out there, you know, that's it. Nature's not going to come around and little fairies are going to pick you up and take you away. Nature's a bitch. You know, she'll eat you alive. No.
Well, yeah, I mean, what I'm realizing with people when they travel, they are planning too much in advance. They feel like they have everything under control. And if you be able to let that control habit to let go and living in a moment and just explore by opportunities. I think that's for me the best way I can describe my adventures, because adventures cannot happen because an adventure is like an unknown situation. That's the reason it's called an adventure. So if people planning every day what I want to do, well, there's not much time that adventure can occur. So that's what I realized when I bicycle. For example, I bicycled cross country United States, and I was running into different cyclists. I was running with a couple, and I had like this bicycle adventure maps. So first of all, I did not had specific maps for going cross country. I just had my state maps, and I looked at the state map to figure out what road I want to go. And when I saw a hot spring out of my way, like for example going north, and I was going from east to west, I just bicycled 100 miles north because I want to go to that hot spring. So to compare to that couple, they had like the specific adventure cross country bicycle maps. So they had planned for the next 2.5 months, 3 months, how long their trip was, to go from point A to point B, and then the next morning from point A to point B. So everything was planned out for like 2.5, 3 months. And well, what can happen is that you bicycle to that campground, and that's all what can happen pretty much. And then I realized how boring that can be because I joined their routine. And then I said to these guys after 2 days, so you and a guy join my routine. And at that time, I belonged to an organization that was called Servers. So very familiar, similar to couch surfing. Couch surfing is like when people let you stay in their own house, so you meet local people who are living in the area, and I think that's the best way to discover a new place. So I invited them. I called up like a couch surf host called in like the old days Servers, and asked the people, is that okay if I can bring 2 non-members? And they said, yeah, no big deal. You cyclist, you trustworthy, so we can let you all three together stay in our place. And it was a party, and I invited them over, and we had all a great time. And then I said, well, I think I will be on my own again, and I took off. But it was a great opportunity to show that couple how different it can be bicycling across the country if you be more open and a little bit more spontaneous and not planning everything day by day, ahead and ahead and ahead. Because yeah, it's like going to work, because you have to get up in the morning, you're working your 8-9 hour shift, you come back in the evening, and the next morning you have to get up again. That's what I felt exactly, and start enjoying themselves. They went to work by bicycling across the country. They got up in the morning, bicycled like between 60 and 90 miles, went to the campsite, arrived really early, like early afternoon, just sit in a campsite, waiting until sunset, pitched up the tent, and They got up the next morning. I never had that kind of setup. I got up in the morning. When I woke up, they had actually alarm clocks. I never had an alarm clock in my life. When I travel, I get up and I feel like I want to get up. And I bicycle so much as I like to. Sometimes I bicycled over 100 miles, and sometimes I bicycled only 10 miles. It always depends what can happen in between. And that's what I feel like. People have not so much adventure in their own life because they're too much driven by being in charge, want to be in under control. But that's what you're missing out. And when you be under control and you want to figure out everything in advance, there's no much time anymore for the adventurous part. That makes sense?
Yeah, no, I mean totally, and I would compare the two. I mean, we were saying before we went live. I mean, this is where I think it's very similar to all experiences in life. I mean, that experience you mentioned then about holding and wanting too much control. It's the same with like my painting or any creative experience. If someone holds too tight to something, it'll break. It's like a string of a bow. You know, you can't have it too tight and you can't have it too loose. It's got to be in the perfect, nice flow, like you said. And that's how you got to treat life. You've got to be like water and just, you know, circumnavigate life and see how it comes to you. Because, I mean, this is sort of, you know, ties. I mean, we you know, we've spoken about previous experience. I mean, this ties to about, you know, very perfectly about how you can't actually control anything, because this leads to a day, you know, I mean, as you would know, I mean, there you are in 2000 and, you know, in November in 2013, and bang, You know, you couldn't. No, it doesn't matter. The life came along, and that chaotic moment happened, and there you were, and that happened. So, like you said, you can't control everything because life will just happen. Now, you know, that's a very critical day in your life, and so you know, we started off with, you know, what it was like when you were a kickboxer. So let's fast forward, and there you are. You know, I mean, talk me through that day, and I'm sure that before we go any further, I mean, I've had a sort of a couple of experiences. One not recently when, you know, I had a near-death experience, and people always either shy to ask you it, or they're going to go straight back in. And I think the interesting thing where maybe me and you personally can sort of, you know, understand this. Are you? I think most people will ask you about the events, and like when I, you know, like when, you know, like any event when someone has a near-death experience or a horrific accident, they want to know about the very event. But do you think that? I think one of the things that I found was that people understand that, okay, there's a moment in the day, but then there's all the 8 months of recovery that they're not interested in those moments when that's the hard moments. I mean, I know a lot of that the November day is a lot about that day, and there's a lot of critical moments about that day, but it's the 8 months, the 6 months of recovery when I was reading, thinking that's what I want to know about. I mean, how did you day by day face the battle of having to know that your leg was gone, and you know, and doctors telling you that your leg was going to go, and then the motivation to get up and carry on day by day by day, because these are the things that are, even on the psychological level. I mean, how long did it take you long? Did you suffer for long times with flashbacks? I mean, do you still have flashbacks now, and does it affect you? And these are all the things that people, I think, sometimes can forget about when you have an experience like that. It does affect you quite, you know, internally inside your mind as much as it does physically inside your body.
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to tell the people what actually happened. I mean, in 2013, 2.5 years ago, I was rappelling off a cliff. I did canyoneering, so it's not rock climbing. You instead going up, you're going more like down. You start in one side of the canyon and working your way all the way through. So I was so many circumstances. I got really super lucky because Lake Powell, Utah, there's a canyon called Montezuma. And the Montezuma Canyon, end of the canyon, there's like over 250 feet rappel. And thanks God that rappel is in open air. So most canyons, the rappels is usually inside the canyon, so it's no open space. So when I was rappelling that canyon, I free fall 40 off feet because I came off harness. I free fall the last 45 feet. In the beginning, I was rappelling super fast. Something was not right in my harness setup, and that was a good thing. I was going really, really fast. And then it's a self-rappel, so you have a rope in your hand and you can make a complete stop. So I came to a complete stop because I want to be under control, because I was spinning in 360 degrees turns and I was completely wild. And so I stopped myself and I was trying to get organized again. And all of a sudden, it was like this click noise, and I realized I'm off harness. I started free falling. I'm a skydiver. I like free falling, but at that moment, I realized there's no parachute. So that was another thing. I became unconscious, not a miracle, because when you're unconscious, I'm a paramedic and I'm an EMT basic in the United States. So at impact, when you're unconscious, you're not tensed up with your muscles. So when you be more relaxed at impact, you cannot break so many bones. So I landed first on my left leg. That's the reason my left foot was completely shattered. The tibia and fibia was disconnected from the foot by itself. And with that impact, my pelvic was broken in 2 different places. It's called the open book fracture and a shear fracture. That means the pelvic was broken like in 2 pieces, like right and left, like an open book. When you see you're folding a book open, and the shear fracture is from up and down. So that was 2 different severe breakdowns in my pelvic. And I realized when people moved me on the bottom of the canyon, I heard this crepitus noise. I hear that was something going on with my pelvic. So I realized I did have a broken pelvic. So with that kind of injury, you can actually internally bleed empty. Your body has maybe between 5 and 6 liters of blood. And when the pelvic is broken, your arteria are wide open. You can bleed internally empty. So I thought about telling my friends how to make a tourniquet around my pelvic, but I was so severe in pain, the thought was going away, and I forgot to mention that to them. But that was really another miracle. I was able to hold on for like 8 hours before I ended up in a hospital. Also, all my ribs were broken. I had one punctured side of my lung. I was still able to breathe. But when you have a punctured lung, usually you cannot breathe anymore. So there's another miracle. Another miracle was at Lake Powell. There was a motorboat. It was off season. There was not really likely lots of traffic underwater. And these people was able to contact from a helicopter. So search and rescue was contacted right away. And then a smaller helicopter had to get organized because the bigger helicopter couldn't land. So they dropped off the nurse and the paramedic. They had to hike like for 35 minutes to get to me. I got pumped up with morphine. And then a smaller helicopter finally arrived. It couldn't land, only halfway in the air, halfway on the ground. They shuffled me with a spine board inside a little machine. And then we had a rendezvous with the bigger helicopter. And they shuffled me out from the smaller one into the bigger one. And then a nurse started yelling to the pilot, if you're not flying my patient right away, she will die on me, because he refused to fly on because his airtime was already being over. So he had to contact a new pilot because he was not allowed to fly anymore. So she convinced him, because she told him, I will die otherwise. So I was still conscious, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm dying. That's interesting. So, I mean, there was really so many things all together that I was able to survive that free fall. I mean, that's quite amazing.
Well, you just mentioned then, and I can't really let that pass. I really want to linger on that. You just mentioned, oh my God, I think I'm dying, or oh shit, I think I'm dying. I mean, now that's a profound moment. Not many people have that experience. So, I mean, I think for most people, I mean, anybody who's not been in your experience will never know. They can never be fully empathetic of what you there that moment, because none of us are going to have that, or hopefully have that moment. So, I mean, you said you were in pain. I mean, what is that pain like? I mean, most of us have broken a few legs, and or broken an ankle or bone, and maybe you understand. You have that much adrenaline rush. So, did you have what? I know it's really difficult to describe this, but I mean, what was that pain like compared to maybe other pains that maybe people can associate with? I mean, was it a pain beyond anything you describe, or was it? I mean, how you kind of brushed over it, and I think it's something. It's not something that's most of us experience. And you said like
Well, I
you
mean,
go on.
scrape to describe pain is really not easy. I mean, pain is really not easy words to find. I mean, what I can describe at this given moment was that I had friends, like we are a group of 8 people, good friends of mine. I had to squeeze their hand to be able to live through that pain, because a human support, like someone who gives you his hands to hold on to it, it really, really did help me in that given time, until finally I was helicoptered into the hospital. So I was squeezing so strong my friend's hand that I had to make turns. So because I felt like I was more like for them a tourniquet, because I was squeezing so hard their hands, they had to make turns, because I was cutting off their blood supply almost. So that really, really helped in that time being, to having support from your friends. And that was the only I think that was the only reason I was able to stay conscious and live through the severe pain. I mean, pain is really hard to describe. I mean, I don't remember exactly how that pain felt. It's like, I can tell you right now, 2 nights ago, I still have severe pain. I have nerve pain. It's not phantom pain. I have actually pain in my limb. And it's like, from a pain scale 1 to 10, it's like a 10. It's like a nerve pain. It holds on for like 1 second, and then it goes away, and then it comes, and then it goes away. So it's like one sharp pain for like
Mm.
6 seconds, and it comes and it goes. That meant that usually what happens, it's usually at night. I don't, during the day, I don't have that kind of pain, because I'm active and my blood circulation is going on. But at night, when you're relaxing, that's when it happens. And the pain medication will not kick in right away. So I have to wait. And at that night, 2 nights ago, I had to wait like for 4 hours before the medication kicked in. And that's like pain, you want to cry, but you already lived that kind of a pain. There's no more tears coming out of your eyes. It's just a very frustrating time. You have to, I mean, what I'm trying to tell you is, you get just used to it. I know it happened already many times, and it's horrible, and I cannot sleep, but I got used to it. And I said to myself, when you get killed, makes you stronger. I just know I will go away. I have to wait 4 hours, and then finally the pain is under control. But what I want to do is I don't want to be becoming addictive to pain medication that I want to take just in case I could get a pain again. I'm not taking everyday pain medication. I'm not taking pain medication sometimes, not at all, for like 2 weeks in a row. And I take that chance that I will be surprised at night to having pain again because, well, I have to live for 4 hours to live with that pain. But before I ruin my internal organs and taking pain medication every day, and you have to increase the doses, then all of a sudden, again and again, to make the same benefit out of it. So that means, well, sometimes you have to suffer to get better. That's my general motto in life. What you not killed, make you stronger, you get toughened up. And that's the only way how to get better. And that's what I want to try to come across with the walk to recovery. Because when I was working out to get my body rebuilt, because I was hospitalized for almost 4 months. I was in intensive care for 6 weeks. So my whole body was atrophied. I did not had much muscle strength anymore left in my body. And I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't walk. I started walking slowly then in a walker. And then I walked in with a prosthetic leg and a cane. And then I had zero leg strength, so I was limping. So I went to the gym. I went to my physical exercises, and I rebuilt it then slowly close to 40% leg strength. And that time I was back in Germany. I was living with my parents. Then again, I was leaving my parents' house. I was 17 years old. So being an adult and living then with your parents all of a sudden again, it was kind of a challenge. And I realized after 8 months, I had to take off before I started getting into depression, not because of losing my leg, because of living with my parents again. So I decided to walk to recovery. So that meant that I decided to walk from Georgia all the way up to Maine, and it's a hiking trail called the Appalachian Trail. So it's over 2,200 miles long. And the reason I was able to feel comfortable with doing that task because I did hike in 2006 from Mexico all the way up to Canada. That's called the Pacific Crest Trail, and it's 2,600 miles long. So I was very, very familiar what I was planning to do, and I was making researches, of course, on the Appalachian Trail because I know I will walk the first time in my life on a prosthetic leg. So, and with the prosthetic, usually it takes for most people when they losing a leg to get used to a prosthetic leg takes one about 2 years because your limb is atrophying and loses all the muscle strength from your calf, and it gets smaller and smaller. So you have to get new casts and a new prosthetic calf. The foot stays always the same, but the cast around the foot, or like not the foot, the limb, it's called. That's what you have to get changed over and over again. So I knew when I hiking the AT, I have to get off the trail and get resupplied with a new cast, with a new um, kind of appointment to find a prosthesist on the East Coast. So I was making researches with my prosthesist in Colorado. I got a list of different prosthesists along the way, so I was able to manage. So when I hiked from Mexico up to Canada, it was 2,600 miles. The Appalachian Trail is only 2,300 miles, but I know it will take me way, way longer. And so instead 6 months, I hiked 9.5 miles. So it was a long hike. I did hike 9.5 miles. So I started in March last year, and I finished the hike just recently in December 26. And
Yeah.
from 40% leg strength, I gained close back up to 80% leg strength. The way to figure that out is you can go on the bench press in the gym, and you can push with your right leg the max amount of weight, and to figure out how much you can push with your prosthetic leg. If you can push the same as much, of course, then you would have 100% leg strength, the same as much on your right hand side. But that's the way I discover how much leg strength you build up. So I did that test again, and I felt like I was one about to 80% because I saw that I could not push 100% the same as much, but I was pushing with my right leg, but like a third less. So I was one about 80% I rebuilt. So it was like a kind of amazing thing what I was able to go through because the pain was really incredible, amazing, strong. I mean, hiking in the beginning, I was able to make maybe 7 mile days. And then I was able slowly building up from 7 mile days, one about to 10, and then slowly to 12. And then my longest was then over 20 miles. But that's called slack packing. My backpack, I was making really long researches to find the lightest backpack on the market. And I also got sponsored. I want to say thank you to my sponsorships. Uh, that sponsored me their carbon fiber backpack. Hyperlight Mountain Gear, who sponsored me that backpack, and so I only had less than 30 pounds, because if you're carrying more than 30 pounds or 40 pounds that most people have, then it's definitely way more difficult. So I was really below 30 pounds, and that was another reason I was able to make that hiking trip all positive, to make it possible to make it all the way through. Yeah. And what also happened was, like, I got an infection 3 times. Right away in the beginning, in the first 2 weeks, I got a severe infection, so my limb was swollen up like a baseball. I could not fit anymore in my prosthetic. So I had to get off the trail. I had to find crutches. I was on crutches for like 10 days. I was on antibiotics for that time. And then after 10 days, I got back to the trail and continue hiking. And that happened. And again, in Maine, I had to get off the trail. And then it happened again in Virginia. I had to get off the trail because I got 3 times an infection where my limb was so swollen up I could not fit anymore in my prosthetic. Yeah.
Well, this is. I mean, as we were sort of starting this conversation with, and I mean, I think the reality is, and then what you just described in the last 10 minutes, and then you can hear other people complaining about the temperature of their house being too cold. It really does put it in perspective, and I think this is the real essence of why these conversations are necessary. Because I mean, I think most people would struggle to walk 2 miles a day. I mean, and then you're saying, oh, I'm just walking that. I mean, give us some sort of impression. Paint me a picture of some of the. I mean, obviously, it's not just flat terrain all the way. I mean, are you walking up some mountains and valleys? I mean, give me some of the. I mean, what was the highest point you got to?
Well, I mean, the highest is not really kind of reasonable, because it depends on which elevation you start hiking up that mountain. I mean, the most difficult section of the entire Appalachian Trail is New Hampshire and is Maine. Maine, it ends with Katahdin. Katahdin is the last kind of destination you have to go through, and Katahdin actually kicked big time, but because what it's called when you're hiking all the way from Georgia up to Maine, you can do also a flip-flop. The reason I was able to hike for 9.5 months, because I could not hike from Georgia all the way to Maine in one direction. So I did hike halfway point. That's Virginia, West Virginia actually. And from there, I was jumping in a rental car. I drove all the way to the ending point. That was Maine. And then from Maine, I hiked all the way back where I left the trail. So it's called a flip-flop. You still hike the entire distance, but because of the season, I started in March, but I did hike until December. So in Maine and New Hampshire, it will start snowing in that time in December, of course, and that would be way too difficult in that high elevation with all the mountains to go across with severe snowstorms. So when I did I drove all the way up to Maine and started hiking then from north back to south, I had to go over Katahdin, and Katahdin was the most miserable kind of task I had to go through, because I was planning and start going up Katahdin, going back the same way. I decided to go from the ending point of Katahdin, going all the way on top to Katahdin, and continue down on the opposite side of the mountain and start going up and down the same direction. I decided to go all the way up and down in one continuous way, because most people, when they're hiking from south to north, they're going up Katahdin, turning around and hiking the same way back. So I was trying to go from the ending point of Katahdin and making all the way a continuous trip. So I was not want to buy like expensive maps for Mount Katahdin, so I decided just to figure it out on my own how to get up there, and I got lost. I ended up in a different peak. It was the same elevation. It was Peak Palo, and so I had to get down and sleep overnight, like in a kind of a shelter, and then I hiked the next morning, and I made finally up to Mount Katahdin. And when I was making up to Mount Katahdin, the weather changed. The day before, it was end of June. It was a beautiful day. The day before, I was like in the 80s, and the next day, the temperature dropped down to almost like to the 40s. It started raining, and the wind chill factor always kicked the temperature below 32, so it started freezing temperature. And the wind was like 80-mile-per-hour wind. So with my prosthetic leg in that point, I had maybe 50%, 60% leg strength. I got blown over by the wind 3 times. I mean, there was nobody up there anymore. Completely on my own. I was in high elevation up there, freezing temperature, starting raining really hard. And you know, common sense kicks in after I got blown 3 times over and it was a really narrow ridge with cliffs right and left, pretty steep. And I realized there is no way a helicopter could help me at that given point if I sprain my ankle or break a bone or do anything like stupid. So I quit. I stopped hiking. I found myself kind of a shelter, like a hole in the dirt. I digged myself in to protect myself from the elements. And I was so happy about the fact that my smartphone was really smart at that given time because it had a signal. So it was the first time ever in my life I did call 911. I usually not likely to make that phone call for myself because I have a big ego, but in that given time I was really happy to have a number available I can call up, and actually someone answered the phone. I was so happy. And it took like 2.5 hours for the ranger to get me. I had a whistle. I was prepared. I did have my sleeping bag. I had great items to protect myself from the cold temperature. So I put myself in a sleeping bag, and I was able to kill time for 2.5 hours before the ranger showed up. Then I had my whistle, and we whistled to each other because it fogged up. Visibility was really almost zero. So with the whistle noise, I had a whistle, he had a whistle. We were able to find each other. And then he had protective gear because I did not have my rain gear because I only had partially of my gear with me because I dumped some of my gear and the ending point because I know I was hiking where I was already coming from. So anyways, so the point was he had protective gear and he had also additional food because you're burning a lot of calories when you're shivering and you're having hypothermia stage 1, stage 2. After you started shivering and then shivering stops, then it starts you getting to stage 2, and you starting getting to stage 3, then it becomes really dangerous because all of a sudden you feel like you're getting hot and you want to take off clothes. So that's then really dangerous because then you're losing your mind. It did not came to that point, thanks God, but we started our hiking out and together after I got a couple bites to eat, after I put the rain gear on what he got up there for me. We both got blown over. I was holding on him on his backpack and the wind was so strong he was blown over with me and we had to start crawling on all four until we was able to come to a protective section, and it took another hour before we hit the tree line again. After we hit tree line, we were protected from the wind by the trees and there was an easier descent all the way down to the ranger station. At the ranger station, they had already a big campfire going on inside the ranger station. So I was able to warm up, and I had a shelter ready for me set up with a couple kind of thermal rests and a sleeping bag, a warmer one because mine was already soaking wet. So that really, really was a huge help, and I really have to write a thank you letter to Mount Katahdin, to the ranger station, because that was amazing. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm just thinking while you're saying all that, and while you're doing that, some people are just going to the shopping mall and going home and watching television. It's the exact example of. No, I mean, you were the first, and you are the first female to do that walk, as an amputee. Now, I think, as I understand it correctly, so there's only 3 of you who actually done this before with a bionic leg or an amputee leg, prosthetic leg, no?
Yeah, I mean, I was the first female on a prosthetic leg who hiked the entire Appalachian Trail. There was like a guy with above the knee prosthetic leg. Actually, I interviewed him on the phone because was making researches, and so he was one of the first guys with above the knee prosthetic leg, and I could not find any more other. I mean, I think it was like 2 or 3 guys maybe, because I could not figure it out who else will hike the entire trail. But for sure, I was the first female, so I don't 100% sure how many guys did that on a prosthetic leg, but not that many actually, because it's really hard to figure out something on the internet. I know Scott Rogers, I think that's his last name, but I know for sure Scott is his first name. He did hike, but he didn't hike continuously. He had stops in between. He had to go off the trail for several months, but then he continued again. And he had also been helicoptered out of Mount Katahdin because Mount Katahdin is not really a hiking trail. It's like more like mountaineering. It's overhand. It's like you really have to use your hands to go up because it's like a cliff with 10,000 rocks. It's not a hiking trail. People don't understand when we talking about hiking. New Hampshire and Maine, it's not hiking anymore. It's rock climbing. You don't need gear or harness or ropes, but it's overhand. You really have to use your hands to get over these rock scrambles all day long. So it's really kind of a challenge. It's definitely more difficult terrain-wise in compared to the Pacific Crest Trail. The Pacific Crest Trail was built for mules and horseback. The Appalachian Trail was not meant for that kind of animals. The Appalachian Trail, I call it a roller coaster. It goes straight up and it goes straight down. There's no switchbacks. So the PCD has all over switchbacks because otherwise an animal like a horse or a mule would not be able to go up and down. So on the 18, there's no horses and no mules allowed because there's no animal who could make that entire Appalachian Trail with that severe straight ups and downs. So it's definitely from the terrain way more difficult. And I was kind of surprised because I didn't realize that. So, but we talked early in the beginning when I realizing people telling me you cannot do, or when I realizing it's almost impossible, I'm getting more and more motivated. It's just my nature. I felt like, wow, that's awesome. That's definitely more challenging than I expected. So I really got more and more motivated day by day because it got harder and harder. Especially Maine and New Hampshire was really the hardest section of the entire trail.
Yeah, and I mean, sort of like took a step back. I mean, before you mentioned about the whole of this day when you did lose your leg and stuff. I mean, do you have flashbacks now? I mean, and I mean, is that something that it affects you to this day? I mean, do you have moments when you just wake up and you're like, oh, I can remember the smell or the or a sight or a sound of that day, or have you kind of almost with your own will and intent kind of almost pushed that all out and thought, no, that's just a previous life and now I just move on? I mean, I'm interested in that whole perspective.
Well, I have to go back in that time being because right now I'm focusing right now writing a book. I never wrote a book before, so it's definitely really a new challenge, but I'm going right now into it. It really takes discipline and it's really hard for something what you never done before. And writing was never ever my strong side, also not in my own language, in German. My first language is German, my second language is English. So of course I want to write that in English because it's way more harder right now to speak in German because it take me probably, if I have to start speaking German to you right now, it will take me like 5 minutes before I can become fluent again. So I definitely planning or writing it right now in English, but for sure it's a challenge. And so the main story, of course, is my walk to recovery. So, but it's also kind of a memoir because I have to go back in time and telling the previous stories about my life. The fact I had an accident when I was 16 years old. Maybe talked earlier, broke my neck, broke my back, and was in a cast for like 6 months. So that already made me toughened up. I already was able to deal with pain. There was severe pain already when I was a teenager. So the more pain you have to live through your life, the more resistance you become. That's my slogan. That's what you need to kill to make you stronger. I got so many times killed. I'm comparing that with a cat's life. A cat has run about 9 lives, and right now I feel like I'm on my last one now. So I have to be careful now.
Well, anyway. I mean, one of the fascinating things. I mean, I've spoken to a couple of people who have, in my travels around the world who have had sort of similar one, not as severe as yours having a leg, but they've had, lower from their lower arm calf. One of the fascinating things that crept up with both these when I was having a conversation with both of them was that they still had both of the moments when their mind actually conceived that their real hand was still there. I mean, this is something I'm asking you about. Do you have moments when your body still actually feels that it's still got its leg there, and you go down to scratch it? Like, oh, actually no, or is that past?
It's called phantom pain, and I had a physical therapy in the hospital setting, and you don't doing that exercise if you do not have phantom pain. But this physical assistant, she thought I have to do that miracle training session. So you're putting the miracle right next to your healthy leg, and then you feel like you have both legs again. So you see in the mirror, you see both legs. You feel like you have the other leg then back again, and that was kind of an exercise. But you don't perform that exercise if you do not have phantom pain, and I did not have phantom pain to until this given point. So right after that exercise was over, several hours later, I did became the first time in my life ever severe of phantom pain. I felt like my toe is on fire, and I wanna find a distinguisher to kill that fire. I mean, it was really really bad, and then only at that given time I did had that phantom pain and never ever since again. But I discovered that for one day and I was glad I never had it again back. But early on we talked about nerve pain. Nerve pain, this is what I had to just live through 2 days ago. I mean, that's right now it comes and goes unpredictably. You never know, but I described it earlier. I don't want to get addictive that pain medication because right now I'm taking an opiate. The strongest opiate is morphine. The second lower what you can take is Oxycontin, and the lowest kind of opiate is tramadol. And tramadol is what I'm taking. That's the only medication what I discovered will really help me for that pain. And opiate is a highly addictive substance. You have to be super careful. And I'm really happy, and I don't feel like I have an addictive personality. Like back in Germany, Europeans like to smoke, and when I grew up in like in the 80s and 90s, I smoked with my friends a couple cigarettes, but I never had that urge to buy myself a whole package. So I felt like I never had that tendency to become addictive to something really quick, and so that really helps me right now to deal with that opiate because so many people in this country abusing drugs, and it's
Mhm.
also a black market for opiates. So it's really a different subject. But I'm really really happy that I can dose my doses on my own and know exactly when I have to take it and when not. And it's just I have to take the chance that it comes and it goes because the downside is it takes several hours before it kicks in. So I had to live 4 hours through that pain before it kicked in. But that's the way how it is sometimes. We talked about that too, but it killed make you stronger. So I feel like I'm getting stronger. I thought I already was a tough cookie, but I'm not tough enough. So I still have to live through pain anyway. So yeah.
No, that's part of like you were saying earlier on, and I think this is one of the, the things that's not really spoken about. I mean, many, like you say, many people have severe accidents, and they get addicted to the whole opiates, like you say, and the pain, and it's that ruins their lives. I mean, there's go and read. There's enough stories and there's enough documentaries about it, and like you say, I think it's a white elephant that's never spoken about at all. Really, is the whole drug industry because it's the solution. And I think again, I was reading in your on your website, and I'm pleased, I say recommend to listeners go and read it. But you were saying, no, I'm not. Like you said earlier on, people will say the doctor will say to you, oh, it will take 2 years, and you're never going to walk again, and bang, you're out there walking the Appalachian Trail, and it always breaks down to that the easy way is like you said, the drugs and and opiates and taking. But the hard way is like you've taken the hard path, and that's I think it's essential that
Well,
people hear this
there's
because
no easy way. There's no easy way at all. I mean, people have that kind of solution about thinking there is an easy way. It's like same thing if the dieting. They're thinking this awesome diet will help me to lose the weight, and they're dieting for like whatever a couple of weeks. They're losing weight for sure, yes, and then they're going back to their old daily habits what I had before, and I'm gaining even more weight back. And that's just everything in life. If you're not being committed to make drastic changes in your life, because there's no really easy way out. There's no magic pill who kills or takes care of all your sorrows. You have to live through that pain, and that was the pain what I had to live through for 9.5 months on the Appalachian Trail. I mean, I cannot describe how much pain I had to live through for the several first weeks, months. And the reason I was able, I'm not recommending to everybody who loses a leg to hike the Appalachian Trail like me, because the only reason I thought I was able to do so because I toughened up all my life because I did that crazy career as a kickboxer and as a boxer. I did triathlons, so I kicked my limits over and over again. So I came to a point in my life where I was able to do that kind of craziness to hike the Appalachian Trail just 1 year after my accident. Because what I just said, it takes usually 2 years before your limb is atrophied in the right size that it will fit permanently for good. And that was the other challenge on top of it, not even only having pain. having not a perfect fit for the prosthetic leg, and making adjustments and making improvisations. This improvisation is definitely very, very important, because it's difficult on the trail, because there is no easy way out. You have to figure out how to make things work. And I learned that when I was back in Germany as chef, because when you're working a la carte and something runs out, sometimes people ordering all the same dish in the menu, and you're running out of an item, and you have to be really quick, and you have to make improvisations and figure out how to make it work. And I think because all my past experiences, I had like a whole bunch of stuff figured out in my entire life to make that work, and to be able to accomplish it, that task, that I was able to hike 2,200 miles on a prosthetic leg as the first female hiker last year, 2013. And people can read about the entire story then when the book's coming out on the market, My Walk to Recovery, early next year. I think I will have the book on the market. First, I want to put it on Kindle and Amazon as an audiobook, also as an ebook, of course, and then becomes a success. I definitely want to make it in print then. But that's my new challenge, what I'm working right now on. That's the reason I moved back into Denver. There's actually book clubs. I can get support by other writers who can give me criticism and telling me how it comes along. So that's the reason I'm living right now in Denver again, to go regularly to book meetings and trying to figure out how to make that script ready. And then hopefully next year, not hopefully, I'm pretty determined, and it'll be out on the market end of beginning next year.
Well, I mean, Niki, you're the I mean, I'm sure people are sick and tired of me saying this, but you're the perfect person I think should be having a podcast. I mean, do you know what I mean? If there's someone I would wake up every day to listen to, it would be you, and give me, your insights into life. And this is a great, the age we live in, we can get these communications and this going across. And I mean, the other one I would be personally. Have you ever considered taking a camera out and recording some of your trips and just doing a sort of like I say, almost a daily podcast or a daily kind of like diary that you could make into a documentary? Has that ever crossed your mind?
Well, I got supported by Adidas. They did give me a GoPro camera, but the camera got stolen at trail days. It's like a big gathering. The camera was sitting for free for a couple minutes on the desk, and then all of a sudden I turned around and the camera was gone. And I was not really familiarized with making my own kind of recordings, so I was not really patient enough to figure that all out, because especially you cannot see it what you filmed on your own, and you don't know how the setting was right or whatever. So I had already enough on my hands to figure out how to live through the pain, and pushing myself every day, and then on top filming myself. So I felt like really released when my camera was gone. And so I do have footage for the first 2 months, and I did have an editor on that given time. So that footage is being sent right now back to me to Colorado. I should have that package maybe in the next couple of days, so I can actually look all the way through, and that definitely will help me also to figure out that book right now what I'm writing. So I have some couple of flashbacks with that filming what I did. But yeah, I mean, some people are talented to making great videos, but I don't know. I think I don't have enough patience for that kind of stuff. I took plenty of pictures, and that really helps me to get back in that moment and figure out all that stories again, what I want to write on right now too. Yeah.
Well, it was actually that bleeds into a very point I was going to mention to you. I mean, talk about your photos, and you go to your website, and again, please go nikirellon.com, and you can your whole motorbike. There's another chapter in your life when you did the whole of your motorcycle trip, and one of the fascinating, you talk about the photos, was your photos around Port Alice. Now, the reason I bring up Port Alice, because it looks so remarkably, which is what I love about this beautiful rock that we live on, that we call Earth, is that there's so many places that look so similar and yet are divided by distance and time. Now, Port Alice could just be straight out of Scotland. So tell me a bit about your, I'm going to mention sort of like Port Alice, and then the whole trip. So give us a sort of brief overview of. Tell us about your motorcycle trip, and particularly about Port Alice, because I mean, to explain to people where it is and why it's so why particularly, because you did take quite a few pictures of Port Alice. It was maybe 4 or 5 photos, so it must mean it's like quite special to you.
Yeah, I have a website, www.nikirellon.com,
Hmm.
Nikirellon. And I posted a bunch of pictures on that website because I was hoping to find sponsorship with like Honda because they have an automatic clutch. Because when I got released out of the hospital after my accident, I felt like I was having like this horrible routine, starting becoming a couch potato and not exercising plenty enough to get me back in shape because also had severe pain. It's very hard when you're being in pain to get motivated to get up in the morning out of bed and doing your daily exercises. So I decided no way of return. I quit my apartment and I decided to ride my motorbike all the way across the country. So no way of return. That means I did not have an apartment at all anymore, and I also don't had enough money to pay for myself hotel rooms along the way. So I did had to pitch up my tent every night. So that is plenty of exercise. You have to fill up your gas tank. You have to find a parking spot. You have to push your motorbike maybe. You have to find a spot where I can pitch my tent up at night. So there was plenty of exercising. There is no excuses because when I was living in my apartment and I had pain, I said, well, I skipped my yoga session today because I have pain, I have an excuse, and I stay in bed. And then if you're doing that the first day, then it's easier to do it the second time, and it's much easier than doing the third time. So that's the reason I realizing before I go downhill more and more with my laziness, I kicked myself and I decided to go all the way across the country. And it was kind of a challenge because when you're losing your left leg, that's the side where you have to shift with your foot the gears on a motorbike. And so that's my prosthetic leg. And so I could not shift anymore because I have no dorsiflex. Dorsiflex means the angulation with your foot to push down with your toes and lift up. And I do not have that anymore. I have an artificial foot and I cannot do that kind of movement. So I had to call up a couple of friends who got told that there is an automatic shifter. It's called Pinkel Enterprise electronic shifter. You can shift with your thumb. And now I'm advertising Pinkel Enterprise because that's the worst item you don't want to buy. You do not want to buy as a prosthetic person because this thing does not work. So I called him up because this thing had to replaced 10 million times. Because when I left, even before I left Colorado, I had to go back to the same dealer to make repairs again and again. And then he said it should work right now. I went then from Colorado, Denver, a couple of 100 miles, not even 100, it was less than 150 miles. Grand Junction, I broke down again, had to get towed. Then I decided to go to a BMW dealer. So I paid the big dollars for the BMW dealer because I have a BMW motorbike, and I thought I can figure it out. So they did everything wrong because I did a couple shortcuts. So I ended up in Texas in a gas station, filled up my gas tank, and all of a sudden flames were shooting out of my handlebar. Can you imagine being in a gas station and coming flames out of your handlebar? So I grabbed a bucket right next to me. Usually it's meant to cleaning windshields, right? And I killed the fire with that water. And so the electronic shift, of course, did not work at all anymore. But I was in the middle of nowhere, and it was also the weekend. There was really no way I could figure out to find a repair shop. So, but I was able to put my motorbike manually by hand in third gear, and I started riding that poor bike in third gear because when you start riding the bike, you put in first gear and you shift up to second gear and then to third gear. So I started riding right away in third gear to get me going back on the interstate. I couldn't shift anymore in fourth gear. I had to stay solid in third gear. I was able to get connections with a motorbike website, and I had a contact a couple 100 miles along the interstate in Alabama. I was able to meet up with that people. We went to a mechanic and we dropped off the bike there. I stayed with that couple from that motorbike organization. We came back the next day to that dealer, and I hope he had it fixed or figured out what's at least what it's wrong. He said there is a part from BMW wrong. We have to ship that. We have to order that part, and it has to be shipped from Germany back to the United States. So we cannot help you. And the guy will let me sleep overnight. He has motorbikes. Actually, he has also BMW bikes. And he said, this guy, I don't believe him. So let's grab your motorbike to my repair shop. So he's a private guy with his own garage, and he makes private repairs on his own motorbikes. He was willing to figure out what's going on with my bike. So he called up that Pinkel Enterprise company, get another replacement parts, and he was able to fix my motorbike. And I was able to make that trip all the way down to Miami because I had to catch an airplane. I was still on time. and I was able to fly back on time to Germany to my brother's wedding, because that was the whole idea, riding my motorbike from Colorado all the way up to Miami, because I was invited for my brother's wedding back in Germany. So after I left the hospital, I lived in Colorado for like 2 months. After 2 months, I rode that motorbike all the way across the country, made it all the way to Miami, and then I flew back to Germany, because in that time I had like 10% leg strength at that given time. And I spent time in Germany for like over 8 months. I went to physical therapy, went back to my old swim team, went to the gym, bicycled every day again, and I got back up to 40% leg strength. And that's what I said earlier, the walk to recovery. After I lived with my parents for over 8 months, it was definitely time to move on. And that's the time I decided to start hiking the Appalachian Trail. It was last year, March 9, after the kickoff party. That's like a big get-together with previous hikers and with a bunch of vendors and also motivational speakers. So I joined in Amicola Falls. That's one about the starting point. To attend that event for 2 days, and then March 9 was my first day of hiking the Appalachian Trail.
Man, fantastic. So I mean, so you mentioned, you got your new book coming out, and you've just a whole new process, which I'm saying another one. You just another jump area, the same pattern. You jumped into something you completely unknown, and you dived in, and you're challenging that. My question to you, my friend Niki, is what's your next big sort of thing on the horizon? I know we talked about being spontaneous about life and stuff, but have you got any kind of points on the compass where you're sort of thinking, any particular sort of parts of the world you're thinking, or challenges you sort of bubbling around in your head right now?
Well, I mean, the biggest challenge what I have ahead of me right now is, of course, writing a book. Especially when you never wrote a book before, it's kind of enough challenges every day, especially get you motivated. Because I don't feel like it's an easy thing in the beginning, because it seems like you have to break that blockage in your brain, and then when you're starting having that flow, then it becomes easier. And I don't have that point yet reached, because I just finished riding my motorbike from Florida all the way back across the country again, with several breakdowns again. And so after I got everything back together on track, because I did hike for 9.5 months. December 27 was my last day of hiking. And then I had a couple of appointments back in Denver. I flew back to the East Coast, and I was riding my motorbike for like 2 months, because I did stop several times in between. I also had to stop because I still had breakdowns. Because the funny part of Pinker Enterprise Shifter was, when I was going back to Miami to get my motorbike across the country, I decided first to ride my motorbike all the way down to Key West, the most southern point, because I did spend quite a time down in Key West, and I really liked that place. So when I was riding my bike down to Key West, there was a severe rainstorm, and so I just spent another several $100 for the mechanic and for replacement parts for that stupid shifter. And so as soon as I made it all the way down to Key West and I parked for overnight, I wanted to start up the bike again the next morning, and it didn't shift anymore. I had again really hard, difficult time to make from Key West back to Miami, back to the same dealer where he worked on my bike, and then he looked at my parts what we just replaced, and he said the same part is broken right now again. So we called up Pinker Enterprise, and they said to me, "Oh well, you have to read your manual, and it says you should not ride your bike when it rains. It's not waterproof." I mean, can you imagine? I mean, I called these guys up 2 years earlier and asked them, "Can I put that shifter in for making a trip across the country?" I mean, do they expect it will rain? I mean, how they can sell something like to an amputee who's fresh amputated, and knowing or not telling me that it's not waterproof. So I told them when I was speaking on the telephone with them, I really want to make as much as advertisement for you guys, and telling everybody when I come across and have an opportunity not to buy Pinker Enterprise electronic shifter. It will not work. It is part for track bikes. They're going like for less than a minute, really fast across a really speedy road. And that's when I have to shift really fast, but not for amputees. Pinker Enterprise will not work. So I think I talked enough with that company right now. Anyway.
No, that's that's your privilege, because I mean you're just telling the truth. So I mean, you like you said, I mean the challenge of writing a novel and trying to write all this out is another challenge, and I think it's where it's all kind of merges into one. It's all about the same thing. It's all about, and I think I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, it's all about the intent you have. I mean, you said it's all about, it doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. I think it's about, you said it's about finding the will. Okay, the question I have to you would be, what advice would you give to people to focus that will and to finding that will and then able to push that through? Because I think most people, when they find something they're passionate, will have the, like you are now, they will have the passion to get up and write the novel. But what's the key advice you would give to somebody who's like struggling with maybe fuzzy intent, and they have so many plans and they want to do this, and before they know it, they have, for instance, one of the things many musicians and artists find, they start one project and then they start another project, and then a year later they don't ever finish anything. So it's finding the focus to get that will and the intent focus. So what advice would you give to people, especially
every
after
journey? Yeah, every journey starts with the first step. So I mean, if you decide to wanna hike Mount Everest, it's like almost impossible, because it's a huge accomplishment to climb Mount Everest. But I'm trying to say is, it's not to see the final destination, it's seeing the short distances in between, the setting small reachable goals in the beginning, and then building up to be able to accomplish then finally at one point Mount Everest. If you're setting out Mount Everest right away as your only goal, you will never be able to reach it. So you have to, I never thought in the beginning I will be able to hike the entire Appalachian Trail. I mean, of course that was the idea, but I didn't put myself under the pressure that I was committed, or I felt like someone is pushing me, or I have to prove that I can do it. I mean, I never put myself extremely under that much pressure, because it's the journey, it's not a destination. It's more important that you're focusing at the moment and not about the future, or not anymore so much about the past. It's really important that you feel like you have goals ahead of you set up that can be reached easily, or in a manner of time. If you're setting up way too difficult goals right from the get-go, then it's really hard to make that happen. So really a good advice is figuring out goals, short, middle, and long-term goals, and working on it, and stay focused and not switching up your goals. If you're deciding you want on that goal, then stay with that goal and not switching it up and starting a new project. So right now I'm committed to make that work, to write that book. So I'm reaching out right now for help. That's the reason I'm joining right now book clubs. I'm reaching out for friends who can help me along the way, how to make that happen, to set for myself deadlines, because I have a commitment to kind of an editor who can look through my stuff and give me constructive criticism. So this is the way how to get yourself motivated, meet up with people, and set like short-term goals, and to work towards your major goal, your big-term goal. That's the idea.
Yeah. By the way, your website is really good.
Hey, Rich.
Hey,
how are you doing?
I'm fine. Your website looks really good. You're doing a great job on it.
Thanks.
I think you. Yeah. Hey, did you already? I missed the first part. Did you already talk about like what you did when you were in Germany and all that, or are you staying focused on what you've done in the last couple of years?
My boxing and kickboxing career, we talked about that, and about my Australian road trip and the Pacific Crest Trail. We already covered it up. We're already over an hour on the phone right now.
Sorry, I was on the road.
Like I say, Niki, I mean, it's like you said, we have been on the sort of phone for, we've been doing this for over an hour. So, I mean, there's a few sort of like, questions, to sort of round this up. I mean, where can people reach? We mentioned, your website, nikirellon.com, which is great, because you've got one of those memorable names like myself, so it's easy to remember. Rellon, it's perfect. Niki Rellon with one. So where
Rellon, it's Rellon, R-E-L-L-O-N, or Rellon, whatever you prefer. But Niki is with one K, Nikirellon. Also, what I forgot to mention, already on speakermatch.com, so I already have a couple of gigs lined up. And so I have in Denver a motivational speech for a bunch of employees in a hospital. And also in October, I have a motivational speech on the Appalachian Trail. So yeah, I definitely look forward to get more involved with the motivational speaking part. So if anybody is interested, they can Google my name and look up my website. And Facebook has a bunch of resources of stuff that I did so far. I already published a public Facebook page. So by just punching my name in, Niki, N-I-K-I-R-E-L-N, they can find everything about me out. And yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm starting a new career, becoming a motivational speaker, and writing that book right now.
Don't forget to get another GoPro so you can get video of all your speaking engagements.
Yeah, for sure. You can be my professional TV reporter.
Well, Niki, the one question I before we do wrap this up, and it's been the one that since I know I'm going to be speaking to you, in this conversation, it has been the one that's popped into my head over and over and over again. So I feel it's a miss not to ask this question. With where we are in 2016 and how technology is going to advance forward, if I could take you to a point in the future, whenever that may be, and I could say to you, through whatever medical technology, whether it's through actual mechanics or whether it's through genetic, and I say to you, do you know what, Niki, I can give you your leg back, would you take it?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. If I can get my real back leg, of course, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a pain in the butt. I mean, it's like I would be way more severe if I ended up in a wheelchair. I mean, that would make life way more miserable because I love freedom. I like to be independent. In a wheelchair, life is not the same as much independent and have much freedom anymore because there's so many more obstacles that you have to go through. I mean, staircases. I mean, you really need help once in a while in a wheelchair, way more. I mean, right now it's just a pain in the butt because I do everything what I did before. I mean, it's more challenging riding a motorbike because I had all these breakdowns. If I would have had electronic shift, it would work right away. It would be not extremely challenging, but in that matter, it is just. Yeah, it's I like to scuba dive, and then I have to figure out if I want to go scuba diving, I have to bring a swim leg with me. I cannot just being spontaneous, and if I have an opportunity to scuba dive, like when I bicycle around Puerto Rico, I just decide from today or tomorrow I want to go scuba diving again. So now it seems like right now in my life I have to plan more in advance. So I cannot be the same as spontaneous, not anymore the way I like to be. But I'm be able to do everything what I did before. I mean, skydiving is like something I feel like I don't want to do it anymore because I dislocate my shoulder twice at freefall. I freefall 45, for like 30 seconds. In the first 15 seconds, I dislocate my shoulder, and that happened twice after I had surgery. Then I came back to the States, and then I thought I want to jump again, but then I had this accident. So now with an amputated leg and a not so perfect shoulder anymore, I decided I do not skydiving anymore, but instead I figured out a new sport, is skeleton races. It's kind of a sled, head down first. It's not luge. It's just, like a little tiny sled, and you're going in an ice track with like 90 miles per hour down. And I participate the first first adaptive for people with handicaps. It's called para sports. The first skeleton world championship in St. Moritz in Switzerland. I wasn't able to participate for this season because I was still busy hiking the Appalachian Trail, but this coming winter season, I want to jump back on board and want to compete again in the skeleton race team here for the United States. So that's the new plan. That's what you asked me earlier. What's my new challenge? Writing the book, being a motivational speaker, and joining the skeleton race team again. So that's a new kind of goals and motivational things. What gets me going.
But as I've been kind of saying right through this kind of all the way through this conversation, do you know what I mean? I think it's conversations like this, and is the very essence of what Life is People is about, and all those people, you know what I mean? I think sometimes we can all get not all of us, but a lot of us can get caught in this whole life just goes on, and then that's what I'm saying. You're every challenge. This has been very inspiring from the conversation tonight, Niki. You know what I mean? It's a series of challenges, and whatever obstacles been put in your way, you've just overcoming it and risen above it, and inspired from the other end. And the one thing I know for sure, that if we ever get to the point where we're you know, in our 90s, you know, and you'll be looking around and everyone, some people just be sat there just, you know, crocheting away. There you'll be in the old people's home, and you'll probably be climbing the roof and skiing off the top. You know, it's going to be an insatiable moment right to the day. It's just part of what you are. I mean, it's the way it is. So I thank you very much for your time, Niki, and I think we make this the first of many conversations. And anytime you've got any, you know, your books out, or anytime you want to come on, and please, let's make this the first of many conversations. And my friend Rich, it's been good to catch up with you again. You know, again from New Mexico. But for me, over here in Scotland, and from Denver, and from New Mexico, I want to say life is people. And thank you very much again for coming on, Niki.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Thanks a lot. You take care. Appreciate it.
Life is people.
Thanks.